Hello everyone and welcome to the Power 365 show. Today we chat with Manuela Pichler, Business System Manager at Virgin Atlantic, and delve into PowerApps Governance, best practice examples and maintaining momentum for the future. For full show notes, please go to nz365guide.com/103. Now let's get on with the show. Manuela, welcome to the Power 365 show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good to have you on the show. Just for our listeners, just so you know, you might notice about partway through there's a bit of a rejig, and that is because we've recorded this in two parts because we lost the start of one recording. But that aside, Manuela, can you tell me where you come from in the world?
I'm originally from Vienna, in Austria. I moved to the UK about 7.5 years ago now. So yeah.
And so to me, your accent sounds a bit French. Is that standard for those in Vienna?
I hear that a lot, yeah. I think so obviously my native language is German, but we speak German with quite a heavy accent. I almost compare it to Scottish. Like their native language is English, but they speak with a heavy accent, and Austrian is very similar in that respect to German. And I guess that gives people a French accent, so it's usually what I get. Usually people think that I'm French because of my accent, yeah.
Okay. So what's the best thing to do in Austria?
I think most people would say skiing, but I actually don't ski, so I can't comment on that. But I've heard the mountains are great.
So, when I think of Austria, I think of apple strudel, I think of schnitzel, and I think of Hundewasser.
Yes.
Would that be right?
Yes, that would be right, yeah. And hiking, lakes, beautiful lakes.
And hiking and lakes, yeah.
And in Vienna, I guess you've got a lot of classical music. And the best Christmas markets in the world. Also, yes. I am biased.
Yes. I've been there for Christmas markets, and they are amazing. So when you're not working, what do you get up to?
I volunteer at a dog shelter on weekends. So I help kind of exercise and take care of rescue dogs to get them ready for their forever homes. The shelter I volunteer at, they take in dogs from kill shelters or death row council pounds. So it's usually dogs in quite poor conditions that might not get adopted straight away. So we kind of help socialize them, make sure they're able to get on with other dogs and accept people in their life again. And then they're hopefully off to a family soon.
Wow. So is London now your home? Are you married? Do you have family here? What's the story?
Yeah, I'm married now. Married an Englishman. So we live in Horsham now. I think when I moved to the UK, I wanted to live in London just to experience kind of the lifestyle there. And last year we bought a house in Horsham, which is like in the countryside. So it's really nice, really good connection to London still, obviously, with the direct train. But much closer to the countryside, so we can go for walks on the weekend and have a bit of a quieter time there.
So, Manuela, what's involved in rolling out PowerApps company-wide? I know that's a key area of responsibility for you. Can you kind of walk me through the journey that you went on to do this?
I think it definitely takes kind of that growth mindset. You do get out what you put in, but it is a challenge. I think just because it's quite a new product. And initially you might be drawn to just think about the single app that you want to create, the one that you need right now. But I think it's important to think about the strategy and your return of investment, what your goal for the platform is, what you want to do with it. Do you want just your end users, your citizen developers to use it, or do you want IT pros or kind of your traditional software developers to use PowerApps as well? Why are you going to use PowerApps over kind of traditional software development, or what are the requirements that the business have that you can't solve in your IT department at the moment? And then kind of focus on like areas that you want to address, things like the adoption, the governance, the support, and define tasks for each of these buckets that you want to tackle. So I think it definitely helps having kind of a project plan in place for an enterprise scale rollout of PowerApps. One of my friends, Andrew Welch from AIS, he's written a white paper on the Power Platform Adoption Framework, and that really addresses the soft skills or the tasks that you should have in place for enterprise-wide rollout, and it contains like guidelines on how to adopt the platform at scale. So I think it's a really good starting point if in your organization you're thinking about it but don't really know where to start.
Yeah. So kind of what made you actually, kind of how did the first app happen? How did you head down that path and if you're like your discovery, tell me about your discovery of Power Apps and why you decided to start using it on a larger scale.
So I think for me it started with using it myself at first. I'm a traditional developer. I was quite involved in our Office 365 rollout at work and discovered Power Apps through there. And I created quite a simple app with it. And then, to be honest, didn't touch it again for 3 months just to see how that kind of went, how I got on with the change management, how stable the tool was, how the users interacted with it. But it became really apparent that because we're quite heavy Office 365 and SharePoint users, that PowerApps would just increase the amount of solutions that we could provide to our mobile workforce, especially, and how we could serve customers, like internal customers, with this tool. So it then started with my team, which is 8 developers, using PowerApps as well to create solutions. So we kind of put that in place, and we then started the adoption with keen users in the business. So we identified sort of champions, tech-savvy people that we got involved in a learning journey on PowerApps just to see what they can come up with. I guess we then reached a point where, because of my background in IT, I knew that we had to think about the governance and the support as well. So it was quite natural, I guess, to then put in place digital guardrails and a governance framework that our IT operations team would be happy with.
So one of the things that a lot of companies have concerns about with Power Apps is that the risk is that anybody can just start creating apps. And, I know that you just mentioned their digital guardrails. You talked about creating support infrastructure for them and governance. So how does that work for you?
Also, I think it's all about communication. All the tech in the world can't solve a problem if you don't talk to the people. And I think a lot of everyone that I've met, they just want to solve a problem. They want to make their work better. They want to be more productive, or they want to increase the customer satisfaction or operational efficiency. And a lot of what I would call citizen developers, they don't know about application life cycle management, and they don't have to. So I think it's important to make it as easy as possible for them to follow the path that you want them to follow. But in the end, it's all about just talking to them, informing them, and educating them about what you expect to see in their applications. Kind of provide standards for them, put in place data loss prevention policies so they can't leak data accidentally into systems that you don't want your company data to be connected to. What we've done is we've developed a PowerApps template that follows best practices, and it also includes components and other kind of screens that we like to see in apps. And we've provided so our citizen developers have access to that, so they can base their applications on this template, and they, I think, quite naturally follow the same practices that they see. So if there's naming conventions in the template and we see them adopt them without having to talk about naming conventions, it's just because they see that implemented in the app that they take that on board and continue doing that for going forward. So I think that's really it's really important to make it as easy as possible to adopt the platform. And part of our communication strategy is also to provide learning lunches and show and tell sessions to show other users what's been created with the platform, to avoid duplication of applications, but also to connect various PowerApps users to each other.
Okay. So you're kind of like creating a community within your organization
Yeah, yeah,
around building apps.
yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So you've covered there, communication is critical, and then and providing a lot of training. So I take it nobody can just start building an app without at some point already touched somebody in your team or come to, made a connection to actually head down that path. Would that be right?
So we would make the connection either before they create an app, by just people knowing about my team and what we do. But the latest point we hit them is after they save the first app. So we've set up a flow that uses the admin connectors, and that sends a welcome email to new PowerApps users. So at the point that they create a new application, they would get an email to say, welcome to the community. Here's our standards. Here's where you can come for help. Here's dates for our next drop-in sessions, for example. And at that point, they would immediately have that connection. So I would know about them, but they would also know whom to reach out to. And they would then get the kind of a regular newsletter that goes out to our internal community, where again we highlight some of the achievements that we've made with the platform, but it also summarizes some of the latest release notes. So it's a more digestible format for people that aren't kind of constantly checking the blog, for example.
Yeah. So there's no chance of people creating rogue apps because you're using that flow with the admin connector. You get notified the minute somebody creates one. You kind of then bring them into the fold and start their education journey. So encourage their ongoing development.
Yeah, I think both things are important. I think the initial onboarding is really important, but I think it's also really important to provide continuous learning opportunities to citizen developers, and that can be in kind of various formats. So we send out the newsletter, so they know about new releases in the app, so they don't have to kind of find that information themselves. It comes to them. We provide kind of advanced learning launches where look at offline apps, for example, if that's relevant to you, and that just kind of continues their journey a little bit more.
Excellent. So then tell us about how you've implemented ongoing governance within your organization, specifically around Power Apps.
So I think it's about creating an environment in which your users can grow and thrive. So we put in place standards, but the purpose of them is so that the developers can build apps with confidence, knowing that the app is managed, secured, and supported, and they're confident using the tool almost. I think there's a little bit of soft skill and a little bit of technical skill in there. So we make quite heavy use of the admin connectors that are available in PowerApps and Flow. So we've built admin dashboards in Power BI, and an admin Power App that highlights all the apps that are being created, who they're shared with, what connectors they use. So we kind of have a complete overview of what's going on in the environment. But it's also about building the relationship with the end users, but also with departments like architecture, information security, IT operations, so you can understand what they perceive as risks with the platform, and so you can address that, so you can put in place a support team, for example, if an app becomes more popular than the end user anticipated, and it now needs 24/7 support, which they can't provide. So they have the ability to hand their application over to a support team that can provide that level of support. And I kind of call that like the no cliffs. So they don't, it's not like they've created a Power App and we go away with that concept and develop something completely different that does the exact same thing. We take on their Power App and continue to support it and build on it. So it's not, we don't duplicate any effort there. I think it makes it easier for both IT and citizen developers because they can help themselves to maybe to a certain point, and then need that relationship with IT to create something that goes beyond what they originally imagined, for example.
Yeah. I noticed one thing unique in the conversation so far here is that you seem to have a high degree of focus on people, where often, there's a perception with IT folks is that they're more interested in technology than people, but you seem to have really engaged with the subject matter experts across your organizations and really brought them on a journey with you.
So I think that's true, but I also think the people side was more difficult for me because I've got a huge technical background. So learning the admin connectors, building something on top of that came really easy for to me. It's the people engagement piece that was difficult. That's why I tend to talk more about it, because I think if you are based in IT, that might be a common struggle. But it's so important. I think the best applications happen when IT and citizen developers work together rather than against each other, and where everyone feels confident with what's created.
I like it. I like it. So, can you step me through kind of what are the key programs that you have in place to bring the subject matter experts, the citizen developers on board? Because I know that you've got a range of programs in place. Can you kind of step me through what those programs are and, how you keep it exciting for people across the organization?
So we run internal app in a day sessions. So that's kind of the more formal training content. We keep that to a group of 10 people, just because we think that's the best way of learning is in a small group where we can provide attention to every individual. Going forward, they can then make use of an app called Champify. It's available in the community gallery to download. Steve Jeffrey created it. And it's a power app that brings in video training content from YouTube, for example. So people can watch videos and they earn points, and there's kind of a leaderboard. So it's a bit of a gamification to it, and it means that people can learn at their own time, at their own pace. We then organize hackathons to solve like a real business case. So we would ensure that the people that are involved in the hackathon get an app that they can walk away with that's kind of functional. Even if it's not the finished product, it's at least something that works, that they can show their colleagues. And for that, we would usually get subject matter experts in the business in the room, and then maybe 2 or 3 people from my team, and we would address both the business case, but also make sure that they learn how to use the tools. So going forward, they can kind of continue to work on them. We've got and then we've got show and tell sessions where we show off some of the applications that we build, and we really focus on the benefit that the application has brought. So did it save money? Did it save time? Did it increase employee engagement, for example? So yeah.
So, Manuela, what part does hackathons play in educating and, if you like, empowering your team?
I think they're probably my favorite part of that whole experience. We often get people come to us with use cases of, oh, could we build an app for that, or could we solve this? And we then sometimes organize a hackathon where we get either PowerApps kind of pro users, champions, or people in my team in the room, and people from some of the subject matter experts, and then a facilitator who keeps everyone on track. And we try to solve that business case in a day and make sure that the subject matter experts walk away with a working application that they can show to their team and their management. I think it's very it's often easier to set aside a whole day to work on something rather than break it up into individual pieces, and then maybe in 2 weeks' time they would get a working application because every day you've only got half an hour to work on it. So we sit down, get in a room, and the energy is just amazing. Seeing people seeing something being created in a day is just brilliant. Very often, kind of we would do the initial development, and during the hackathon, we'd teach the subject matter experts how to use Power Apps, and they would then take the development forward, or they would create kind of their user interface, their desired user interface in Power Apps themselves, just a bit like Power Apps and not just a bit like PowerPoint, and not connected to the backend, and we would then figure out how to connect it, and they could then take it forward. I think that that combination works really well. Where if you're quite new to Power Apps, you might be a bit hesitant doing the more complex stuff, but you're absolutely comfortable creating a user interface that you want. And for me, that's one of the real strengths of the platform, because I don't know what an engineer wants to see on their tablet. I don't know how they want the buttons laid out. I don't know what works for them. So that the ability for them to create that themselves, and I can then figure out the data in the background, is really powerful. We're all of a sudden we're working with the same tool set. We're working with the exact same tools across the board, and that's just really helpful.
So just run me through a typical hackathon event that you would run. You've got an SME, you've got some pro devs. What are the other type of members that are typically in that session for the day?
So it depends a little bit on the use case. Some of our use cases require data to be captured in an application. And then the output to be visualized. So we would then get a Power BI specialist in the room as well, and they would work on the dashboard at the same time as we're working on the app. So we kind of build the data model first, and then one person goes off, builds the app, the other one goes off and builds the visualization. Sometimes the requirements aren't very clear at the beginning, so we would get a business analyst in the room as well, just to help kind of formalize some of the requirements a little bit more. But yeah, it really depends on the use case. So we're often quite flexible there. I think a facilitator helps, because when the app developer is having a moment of, oh God, I don't know how to do this, they can kind of keep
Yeah.
everyone else in the room busy whilst you're overcoming that hurdle. Sometimes it's important to have a quiet moment where you just figure something out and don't have everyone's eyes on you. So I think a facilitator is really important there, just to keep the energy going, keep everyone focused on the task, and make sure that, yes, people are focused on that one task and don't come up with a million other ideas that they want to solve.
Yeah, excellent. So, okay, I love this. So now that leads to another question, which I know are just a bit out of what we're discussing, but tell me, what does the format of that day look like? So do you start with the SME presenting their challenge or their business a thing that they want to address, and then it's just a pure discussion, or is there any kind of format to moving from business idea to developing your model on how you see that working? So, and then ultimately to how you're going to map that to the database and then create your interfaces and your visualizations.
Yeah, so usually they would share kind of a very brief summary of their use case before, so that if they need any data sources, we can check if they already exist, and we can ensure that on the day we've got access to all of that, the common data sources that we need. And then, yeah, on the day they would present kind of their use case or the issues that they currently have, their vision, where they want to be, and we. Sometimes we would then present some of the solutions that we've built in PowerApps, just to give them an idea of what that can look like. And that's mostly around kind of the user interface. It doesn't necessarily relate to their use case. It's more like, oh, look, here we've built another tablet app. This is what it can look like. Is this sort of what you had in mind? Would this work for you? And then we'd have a starting point for the UI already there. And yeah, then we would just flesh out the requirements further. We'd focus on the data input first, just to give the BI person something to work with, and then build it on there. Sometimes it's easier to focus on the harder part first, and then we build the navigation and the splash screen and everything around that afterwards. But if they have something that works at the end of the day, and I think it's important to be realistic as well. If they have 5 ideas and you know that you can only achieve 2 in that day, be very upfront and honest about that. But make sure that they walk away with a working version of those 2 ideas to take back. Very rarely the hackathon ends at the end of the day. It just that it's a prototype or a proof of concept of what they want, and we would then take that further over the coming weeks or months to build that out. But it's a really good way of getting started.
Excellent, excellent. So, as apps have been built across the organization, what happens when there are blockers, like people are wanting to achieve something with an app and it can't be done? And the thing that jumps to mind is, although Microsoft have provided over 200 different connectors, that can be used, what happens when you've got a data set in the organization or even from a third party that you don't have a pre-built connector for? What's your process around that? And then how do you make that available for everybody else to use once it's built?
So I'm lucky because I manage a team of developers. And I think that's kind of part of the benefit of my team is that we do that engagement and adoption, but we're also devs. So if people come across some issues like that, we could build a custom API for them, turn that into a custom connector, and surface it like that. Or we would, what sometimes happened is we would take their application on, we would become the owners of the app, at least until we hand it over to support, and build that functionality into it. So that sometimes happens when kind of the use case is complex or the data source is complex.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So one other thing I wanted to cover then is from support. Now, you talked about that you have a support procedure to make the app, if you like, expose the app to the support team, so help desk, etc., can support an app. Can you unpack just what is your process, and is it a form that they fill out, of you need to know this, the tips, that type of thing? What is it? How does it work for you?
So for traditional software development, we've got a very well-defined procedure on how to hand applications over to the support team. And I think I just took that process and made it work for PowerApps. So if you do traditional app development, you have to fill out a support procedure manual, and that covers a little bit about the architecture, the data sources it connects to, known issues, troubleshooting, a user manual, and really importantly, the business impact of an outage. What happens if that app isn't available? And so I turned that into a form that the app creator can access as part of the app creator portal. And it's exactly the same information that a traditional app developer would have to fill out, a little bit stripped down, because some things just don't apply to PowerApps. So they would fill that out and upload any documentation that they've created, and that would be made available to the support team. And they would then carry that forward into support. So they would export the app from one environment, import it into the managed environment, make sure that the app in the old environment isn't shared with anyone anymore, and they would kind of formalize maybe the permissions a bit. So if the app is currently shared with individual users, we would set up an Active Directory group that's linked to job roles or job profile, for example, to ensure the leavers, movers, new starters process is taken care of without manual intervention.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's brilliant. So that moves us into the area of admin tools that you use to facilitate governance. So tell me, what do you use, if you like, provided by Microsoft from an admin tool set, and then what have you developed yourself to enable this to be a smooth experience for you?
Yeah, so I think at the moment there's a lot of development that I've done myself because it's not part of the PowerApps Admin Center, but I have hopes that that's going to change soon. So we've built a custom admin dashboard using the admin connectors, and that provides us with an overview of what applications we have, what they connect to, who they're shared with, and we can kind of trigger workflows from there to investigate that further, or to reach out to the app creator, and to see if they filled out the support procedure manual, etc. And then we've built the app creator portal, which I've mentioned before, that gives an app owner an overview of the apps and their compliance rating. That's a traffic light system, and it checks, does the app have a secondary owner? Has it been published in the past 60 days? And do they have the support procedure manual filled out? If all of these are done, they would get a green light, and if one of them is not done, they would get an amber light, and so forth. And we're also using the admin connectors in Flow. So we get weekly reports of what apps and flows have been created, and then apps that are shared with the entire organization or apps that use specific connectors are highlighted to our information security team, and they can do spot checks or reach out to the creators. So it's possible that if someone shares an app with the organization for the fifth time, we would reach out to them and ask them, is it really necessary? Does everyone in the organization need access to that? And then we've also set up the welcome email so that new app creators get welcomed to the community, and they get links to our standards, our theme that we've created, so they can base their applications on that. So a lot of that is quite reactive. It's after they've created something, we reach out to them. And then we've got a SharePoint team site that contains documents like white papers that are provided by Microsoft, or links to blogs and coding standards. And then I send out a monthly newsletter with up to our app creators and IT internally, with what's new in the platform, what's been released in the last month, what's going to change, and usually a success story that we've had in the last month as well. And I didn't think that a newsletter would matter that much to people, but it actually does. A lot of people love Power Apps, but it's not their job to keep up to date with all the changes that are going on. So to have that presented to them really, really helped with kind of their engagement. And I think beyond kind of the app in a day and the learning lunches, is really important to provide kind of that continuous training to your app creators, so they don't feel like they're left alone now they've had app in a day. So we've launched Champify, which is available on the community gallery to download. Steve Jeffrey has created that, and it allows people to view training content and earn points. And we've got a little bit of a kind of a leadership leaderboard going on there.
Okay. Now, one thing that you've said at least 3 to 4 times through this call is the word community.
Yes.
And you're obviously talking about a community that you've developed inside your
Internally,
organization,
yeah.
although I know that you're massively part of the greater global community in this area. So tell me about what are the things, you've touched on a few of them, but first of all, tell me the importance of creating the sense of community within your organization.
I think it just creates it creates an environment in which your users can grow and thrive, and they know that they're not alone. I think when I started using Power Apps and I wasn't part of the wider community, I felt quite lonely, and I didn't know what resources there were out there. I didn't know whom to reach out to. And a lot of citizen developers, they might not feel comfortable reaching out externally because they consider themselves as beginners. They think that their questions aren't valid. They see some of these YouTube videos that are created are really complex, and they're like, well, my question is really simple compared to that. So I think it's really important to create a really healthy environment where every question is welcome, and where people can rely on each other, and they as you find in companies, a lot of the use cases are really similar, even if they're across the department, because the goal or the strategy of the company is the same. So it's important to kind of connect those citizen developers to each other, so they can learn from each other, and they can discuss their applications with each other. So yeah, I think it's massively important to build that internal community.
Do you have a special name for them?
We just call them the champions. So no, not really a special name, no.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So, as in PowerApps champions, or just the champions? Do you tie it to a product, or do you just is it more about within your company? Is the idea?
It's more. So we've got Office 365 champions as well, and Power BI champions. So it's more the name that we've not very creatively given to our super users.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Okay, so this has been interesting. We've gone through this journey of understanding what you're doing from an administrative perspective, how you evangelize and build out the teams, and then how do you create the community around them. What part or what role does management play in all this?
I think it's really important that on each level you have the management buy-in. I think for the citizen developer, they're doing something that's very likely not in their job profile or in their objectives. And they initially have to set aside a lot of time for learning. They will spend hours on YouTube or attending app in a day. And it's really important that their manager is supportive and makes this learning part of their personal development plan and celebrates that success. Otherwise, they might give up and go back to filling out that paper form that they wanted to write an app for. So it's really important to have that encouragement. And if you provide training to them, it's important to talk to their manager and tell them, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. It will really be beneficial. But they have to invest some time initially. And then within IT, it's just as important, especially in what's kind of traditionally enterprise architecture, ops management, areas that might ignore a no-code or low-code solution. The rollout of governance and compliance and true enterprise adoption can only happen if they're bought into the story.
Yeah. So do you specifically then run sessions for management, or are you just tackling management on a one-to-one, level based on an opportunity comes up for you to build something, you see team members report to a specific manager and you engage that manager, or do you have more of a, perhaps a few managers above that's kind of said, hey, as an organization, we can see the long-term benefit of where we're going here, and therefore, expect this?
So within IT, I have I organize sessions to talk about governance and compliance and why that's important and why we should consider enterprise management for Power Apps and not just look at it as a tool that maybe solves a single use case. For the kind of the managers of the citizen developers, it's usually a one-to-one basis. It's not really been an issue before, but I think it's just important to highlight that you need their buy-in.
Yeah, totally. So how do you model best practice across the organization?
I always think it's better if people can touch and use something rather than doing a presentation. So I've created a few PowerApps templates that I've distributed to our app creators that incorporate what I consider best practices. And basically the instruction on the first screen of the app says, click Save As whenever you create a new app. It includes some components and kind of frequently used screens, things like multi-step navigation across a form, our color theme, corporate colors, corporate font, and it gives them a starting point, so they don't have to start from scratch every time. So it's really useful for them and they want to use it. But it also includes kind of naming conventions, how we structure screens, etc. So they would automatically copy what's been done in the template because they don't want to break how it looks, especially kind of in terms of naming convention. If they see something named text name, they would then continue to name their text boxes like that just because they've seen it done. So I always think that's better than just preparing a presentation where it's like, oh, you should name text boxes this and you should name labels like this.
So good. So if there's people listening and they're thinking of, doing what you've done and really establishing a COE within their organization, a core, that are going to start seeing how many different paper-based processes, etc., that can be migrated across to Power Apps, Flow, Power BI, and the Common Data Service. What's your success plan and recommendation to them? How do they do it successfully?
Ultimately, what it boils down to is building those relationships, building trust and communication. I think for me, as someone who's always been a developer, who's always been in technology, the technology part was easy to learn and easy to embrace. It was more difficult to learn about building those relationships, reaching out to people, and building that relationship. I think very often you'll find that business departments are alienated by IT. They don't feel like they understand what's going on there. It's this kind of thing that just exists. And it's really important breaking down those barriers and building bridges, making sure they feel like they can trust you and you work together on the same goal. And on the same note, I think it's really important to be open and transparent about what you can and can't support, what isn't available. Don't like lie to them, I guess.
Yeah, very important. Excellent. Well, we've used up our time today. It's gone very quickly, and it's been a very interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to that white paper that you're working on with Andrew coming out. Do let us know as soon as it's available, and we'll try and get it into the podcast show notes so people can have a read. But I always like to end with a few quickfire questions, and so here they are for you. What are you currently learning yourself?
Macrame and Cosmos DB.
Okay, tell me, did you say macrame?
Yes.
As in with needles?
Yeah, the thing with the thread and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you say the other one was Cosmos DB?
Yes.
Okay, what are you learning around Cosmos DB? Notice I didn't go for macrame because I don't know anything about it, but tell me about Cosmos DB. What are you learning there?
So we're kind of exploring that as a data store at the moment, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about it. So just learning how to connect to it from Flow and PowerApps at the moment, but also what is this thing? How is data stored in there? What do partitions mean? How do you query it? How much does it cost? Things like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, in the last couple of months, Microsoft have moved a lot of what was traditionally Azure SQL data in CDS into Cosmos DB. So, very positive. What is one thing that annoys you the most?
Animal cruelty.
Fair. What is your favorite word and why?
Heimat. It's a German word for, I guess it translates to homeland, but it's more that feeling of belonging somewhere.
Oh, very nice. Do you feel that in London?
I live in Horsham at the moment, and I feel it there. I think a lot has changed over the past 3 years, but yeah.
Cool. Who do you recommend as a guest on the show for future?
Andrew Welch. He's currently writing the Power Platform Adoption Framework white paper, and I think he'd be a really interesting guest to have on the show.
Fantastic. Yes, I think it's a great idea. Manuela, it's been great to have you on the show. Before you go, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
On Twitter, Manuela Pichler with an underscore at the end.
Hey, thanks for listening. Have you rolled out PowerApps within your company? And do you have a story to share? Get in touch with me on any social media platform at NZ365Guy. Full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/103. See you next week.